every woman should be on creatine, in my opinion, because if you look at it, we have less tissue stores, and we store the majority of creatine in our muscle, but it's a small percent goes to our brain, and it's amazing. And so that's why when you look at using it beyond just for muscle performance, and bone health, et cetera, if you want it for your brain, you got to push it a little bit more too. And women typically are not getting creatine-rich foods as much as men are as well. So there is zero on that hair loss thing. Like all these crazy myths that just won't go away. I think if we get ourselves to a nice baseline of creatine that we should always be on, and then push it, use it for hard workouts, for sleep deprivation, because you want to make sure you have what you need in your brain. But then there's the postmenopausal study that showed that women on antidepressants who use creatine had way better effects than women who weren't. If you're a woman and you're eating the typical female diet of, like the yogurt with the fruit on top and the muffins and that stuff, you're not getting it.
Now, today's show with JJ Virgin is brought to you by the good folks over at bondcharge.com, the makers of the amazing red light face mask. This red light face mask is the ultimate way to achieve younger looking skin, reducing fine wrinkles and lines, and even out skin tone, and get your confidence back with youthful, glowing skin. I've been using the red light face mask for the better part of 2 months, and I love it because it's really easy to use and implement. You just put the mask on, you put the charging device in your pocket, and you can go around for 10-15 minutes and do your normal morning routine, such as letting the dogs out, feeding them. I have chickens. I'll get their food ready and get their water ready, and I don't have to change anything in my lifestyle, but I'm helping to optimize the complexion of my skin by using this, and I suggest you do so too, and check out the many reviews over at bondcharge.com/HIH, and I'll put links in the description below. So let's cut back to it with JJ.
JJ, it's great to be with you. As I said on your show, I've been listening to your work for a very long time. Back in 2007, I wanted to be a pro cyclist, and I would listen to the teleconferences that you would offer.
The teleconferences.
Those were so fun. I learned a lot.
Oh, those were the days.
So what inspires you to stay physically fit? You are a rarity in this world. When you travel, you take your supplements, you're working on optimizing your circadian rhythm in new time zones, taking creatine, which I would love to dive into. But what inspires you to maintain this high level of health and fitness?
Why wouldn't you want to? I can't imagine. Now, I've literally been working out since I was a little kid. I bet you have too, right? I just don't know anything else. But I will tell you, I am more fired up about it now than I've ever been. I think it's a great time to be in the nutrition and fitness space. And I think people are starting to wake up to a whole different reality and a whole different paradigm of what 50 plus can look like. I think of what my mother looked like at 50 plus, and we don't have to go there. And she was healthy. She lived to 93. But you start to see all of those things on Instagram of like that woman who started swimming at 67, who's winning medals at 99, and the grandma doing gymnastics. I'm like, sign me up. I am literally pushing myself harder now than I think I have for years.
That's awesome. If you look at the research on adaptation to exercise and muscle hypertrophy, I think the perception is once you get over 40 or 50, there's no way that you can build muscle or adapt. But the research really does show that we can continue to build muscle and change our physique and physiology. So since you've been working out for so long, what aspects are you noticing that are improving? Are you still maintaining strength and getting stronger? Do you focus more on balance? How does your fitness program, what does it look like?
So I never really thought a whole lot about it. I've always exercised, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, I noticed I was trying to open a jar, and I couldn't open it, so I handed it to my husband. Didn't think anything of it. Then it happened again. Then this light bulb moment went off of wait a minute, grip strength, what's going on? I'm the jar opener. And that's when I started to really reevaluate what I was doing, because I had gotten into a rut. And I think this is very easy to do when you've been doing this for a long time, where I will happily go to the gym and lift weights all day long, every day. And, I wasn't doing as much power workouts as I used to, like HIIT training. I hadn't sprinted for years. I know there was that meme going around the internet about how after the age of 30, 5% of the population will ever sprint again. There's no science to back it up, but I was one of those. And so I started to really look at what would happen, because I think it's like what could happen as you age if you are not aware of it and working against it. And so I went, all right, I want to try to pack on as much muscle as possible. I've always been muscular. I've always had low body fat, but I want to take it to the next level so that if I do start to lose it at 70 or 80, I've got way more to lose. It's like setting up your investment account. So I knew that, but I also knew that I had to start really pushing power, because that's where I noticed the biggest deficit. And if you look at the statistics, that is your biggest deficit. You'll lose your muscle size, you'll lose twice as much strength, but you'll lose 3 times the power. And so that's where I started to put a lot of the focus.
Love that. So prioritizing power, I think that can be intimidating for people because they associate power with higher risk exercises and more propensity to get injured. So how do you structure that? Are you doing deadlifts, squats? Are you doing more band work? Like, what does that look like practically?
So I think that we have to kind of back it up to that statement, because that statement is where I think a lot of people get in trouble. They have this idea that they're going to go to the gym and get injured. The reality is you're not going to the gym to get better at going to the gym. You're going to the gym to do the things you would do in normal life so that you don't get injured in normal life. And in normal life, you've got to catch yourself, right? You've got to pick up something heavy. Like when we went on the boat trip I was telling you about, we had these huge duffel bags. That was like farmer's carry, I've literally started to look at traveling as travel CrossFit, where we're hauling these huge suitcases and lugging them up on beds. And I don't want to get injured doing that, which means that I've got to train for that in the gym. And so again, this idea of, I'll do those things and get injured. No, if you don't do those things, the likelihood is that you're going to get injured. And so when I go to the gym, I try to mimic activities of daily living as much as possible. So I think we need to work compound movements. That would be, pushing and moving across several joints, as opposed to, say, just doing a tricep extension, right? Moving across a single joint. I think we have to put in instability as much as possible. But that doesn't mean we start there. If someone's brand new to resistance training, I wouldn't go, hey, let's do some throwing exercises while balancing on a Bosu ball with one leg. That would be ridiculous. But I think that's what we want to move into, so that when we are presented with situations in life where we have to catch something or catch ourselves, we don't hurt ourselves.
I love that. And speaking of travel, I love to people watch when I'm in public. And on airplanes, I have noticed a lot of individuals can't even comfortably pull their suitcase out of the overhead compartment. There's a lot of, and I oftentimes help people, sometimes, but that's a really good proxy for just whole body strength and balance and so forth. When you're doing these multi-joint movements, are you, let's say you were to do upper body, and you were to do maybe chest, shoulders, tricep, doing presses and things like that. Do you allow your upper body to rest and then do legs the next day? And how does this look in terms of the structure of your day-to-day, 3 to 4 days or 5 days a week of exercise?
It always depends on where I am and what's going on. So I just read some research that was looking at doing a full body workout versus doing a split in terms of what it would do for body composition and fat loss and the full body one. And I'm thinking what I really need to move into next. I think it all comes down to your priorities. Right now, my priority is not building muscle. It's focused on more VO2 max and HIIT training, and I'll avoid that. So what I'm working on moving into now is more full body one day and then HIIT the next, or doing maybe upper with HIIT one day and then legs the next. So it really depends. I'll look across a couple days, especially since I travel so much, and think what is available to me. Like the last couple days I was on a boat. Well, one day I was on a boat. We weren't getting off the boat. I'm like, okay, now what? Well, I brought a TRX as a gift, right? Figured out a place to put that. And I literally was at the front of the boat doing up downs, burpees, squat jumps. They're like, okay. But I had to do something, and wasn't going to get it just sitting on the boat, right?
That's amazing. And the thing about the TRX or even resistance bands is they're so small. I mean, you can put these in your suitcase, you can do these anywhere. I love that. And it's just thinking ahead, and planning a little bit, and then getting back into your routine after a vacation is so much easier if you've been doing a little bit of something just to send the stimulus to the muscles.
Right. And it's different. So I look at it and go, I always travel with the TRX if I'm going to be in places where I'm unsure of the situation. Like that's the saving grace. But so's your body. So you look at it and go, you can do a great HIIT workout with your body. Right?
Totally.
So I think the bigger question is, okay, how am I going to pull this off? What am I going to do? There's always a way to do it. And of course, when you're traveling, you're getting in a lot more steps. I wish I could figure out how to get a rucking vest with suitcase weight. I haven't figured that one out. Keep thinking we need to make a water vest of some sort, but
that would be a really cool idea.
Right?
Because otherwise you have these little lead or steel pouches.
They kind of throw your weight over. I pack my carry-on. I was laughing when you said that about the carry-on into the overhead being a proxy for strength. It's like the perfect, snatch up there or clean and jerk. But I put so much in there because I travel with a podcast studio, my lights. I mean, it's probably like 70 pounds that we're hoisting up into the overhead. So it is.
Right. And that's there's a stress aspect of it because you've been sitting for a long time. Then you have to get up and there's people. And so it is a really good functional test.
Right. It
for
is.
Like whole body strength and resilience, which I think is exciting. I still see the comments from mostly women, and the perception is if I focus on power and strength, I'm going to develop all this upper body musculature, and that's going to look unsightly or manly. You've been exercising for a very long time, very feminine yet fit. What do you say to that argument, and what do you say to women when they present that to you?
Well, and then they say, but I just want to have arms like yours.
Right.
I'm like, well, let me tell you what I do to get these arms. It's so interesting because when you look at muscle size, muscle strength, muscle power, if you really wanted to build muscle size, it's a different type of training than strength or power. If you want to get strong, I remember in grad school, one of my girlfriends was a power lifter. I had so much more muscle than she did. Had much better hypertrophy because I was training for hypertrophy. She was training for power and strength. They're different. Having said that, though, most of us are just going to go in and do a resistance training routine. And I hear every day, I just still can't believe it, especially when I talk about that plus creatine. I don't want to get big. I have been training women for 40 years. For 40 years, I've never had a woman doing resistance training get bigger. Ever. Never. I've had women doing no resistance training and not working out, they get bigger. But every time I've ever seen a woman do resistance training, it's like they just put on metabolic Spanx. It's going to hold everything in tighter. It's going to now make you more insulin sensitive. Now you've got better basal metabolic rate. You've got better recovery. You've got more metabolic cost to recovery. It's going to shift you completely to be leaner, fitter, higher metabolism, and you don't get bigger. Right. And if perchance you were going, I don't like the way this muscle looks, stop. I mean, you're lucky if you can build 1 to 2 pounds of muscle a month.
Yeah.
Right.
You'd have to do everything right. I mean, very intentional
about
that.
Diet, sleep. I mean, especially once you're 30 plus, like your hormones aren't kicking in to save you here. So there's so many things that you need to do to really put this together correctly. And it's a slow process. I always tell people this is like watching grass grow.
Yeah. That's a good analogy, watching paint dry, right? It takes a very, very long time.
Yes.
And I want to get into hormones later and talk about DHEA and testosterone and things like that. But what I think where this concern about excessive muscle with women comes from, if they haven't been doing any resistance training and they have a little bit of extra body fat and they start really pushing it in the gym, their muscles might feel fuller, their glutes or their legs. And if they still have a little bit of, and they still want to lose some body fat, let's say, they can feel maybe a little bit more full, and then over time they'll start to lose the body fat and they won't feel that size. Have you found that to be the case? Well,
so there's an easy solution to that. The easy solution to that is to do recomping, is to lose fat while building muscle. Whenever I hear that, I think back to another myth that still seems to be around that was in grad school. In fact, my professors taught me this in grad school. And luckily, I was one of those people that did not listen because I had clients at the time. So I was like, well, I'm not going to get paid to do that. They said, do not have someone lift weights till they've lost the weight, which couldn't be farther from the truth because you've got someone who's over fat. They tend to be more insulin resistant. The fastest way we can fix that is start to build muscle. But if someone wants to drop some body fat and build muscle, then we just recomp them. We get them into a little caloric deficit. We pump their protein up a little higher. We have them doing resistance training, hitting lots of steps, and boom.
Nice.
It can be done.
Yeah. And when you're looking at recomping and getting into a calorie deficit, do you like to do some basal testing with metabolic rate and to see where their metabolic rate is, or calorie tracking? How do you navigate those waters?
So if I could have my perfect world, like in the perfect world, everyone would do a DEXA, and it would be great if they could do a breath metabolism test and compare them. Like, your DEXA is going to do a prediction of your fat-free mass and then do a basal metabolic rate predicted off of that. And I know my breath test and my DEXA were different by about 100 calories. The other cool thing that you can do, though, is I think one of the first things that we should do is just start to track our calories. I'm sure you've seen it. If all you have someone do is just track what they're eating, things shift.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I had a client who could not figure out why she couldn't lose weight. And, she was reporting back then we didn't have apps. So she would, write down, tell me what she ate each day. And I was like, gosh, this doesn't make any sense. And then I went over to her house because she invited me for dinner. And I'm watching her as she's cooking. And I'm like, I was transfixed because she was eating so much while she was cooking. And she had no clue she did that. Like, she ate a whole meal before we ever sat down to the meal. And then she told me about, she basically recorded the meal she ate. And so sometimes it's just the awareness of what you're actually eating, of how much olive oil. I did a podcast with, I forget who was like, do more olive oil. I think it was Dr. Will Lee, and I'm off to Italy, and I must have had like a cup of olive oil on each salad, and then you come home and you're like, okay, rein it in, right. It's still calories, too much healthy food's unhealthy, and it's really easy to overload on things like nuts and avocados and olive oil and ghee, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think just the fact that you're actually going to start tracking and being accountable causes you to be a little bit more mindful about the mindless eating.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big aspect. So I started doing that in the early 2000s, and then now have a pretty good baseline and haven't tracked calories since. But if you haven't yet done that, I think that's
it's amazing. So if you really want to know how many calories you need every day to maintain your weight, just track what you're eating for a week or two. You'll get, now the challenge will be, first, you're going to start to change things the minute you do it. But you have to get into a set place where you're really tracking it, and then you take the average. Just like your body comp, I tell people just get a BIA machine, a bioimpedance machine. Yes, it's not as accurate as a DEXA, but a DEXA is not as accurate as an MRI, and an MRI is not as accurate as cadaver dissection. So you do the best with what you can. But if you look at that trend over time, once a week you take the trend of the week, because every day you'd make yourself crazy, and you do a waist and a hip every week, then you can get a really good idea of if things are improving or not, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can put that together. You can look at your tracking food app and go, oh, I maintain really easily on an average of this many calories a day. Yeah. It might bounce a little bit, but I know for me that's like right around 2,400 is an average some days. Like last night we had a meat fest and did 3,000 calories. The day before I might have done 2,000, but it averages out.
Smart. And then if you do have a surplus like that, will you intentionally fast or have a lower calorie the next day, or you just kind of go by how you feel?
No, I just go by how I feel. I just basically, I eat protein first. That is the biggest thing I focused on. And here's what's crazy. So last night we go out, and we're staying right next to one of those Brazilian steakhouses. We're like, let's just go down there and have a meat fest. We did a pure, like Sean Baker would have been proud of us. We sat down and we literally had meat. Right. And that's all we had. And I'm like looking at this, I wish I had a food scale, because I'm trying to gauge how much of meat that we've eaten. And you just get full. You're like, I'm done. But this week, today, the scale was down 2 pounds.
Wow.
But on both of us, we're both going, I probably ate 24 ounces of meat last night at dinner.
Yeah.
Lean cuts, but still, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of meat.
That is totally. But I mean, what's interesting about meat in comparison to processed carbohydrates and, liquid oils and things like that is the thermogenic effect of protein. And
right. So 25% of that just boom, got expelled. And I mean, I remember last night and then we walked afterwards because we're like, we got to go do something. We have to do something, walk this off. But I thought last night when I went to bed, I go, I'm probably not going to need to eat for days. I'm so full. But woke up this morning, ready to go, ready to have breakfast.
That's awesome. Drilling down a little bit more on protein. Obviously, there's tons of research now. I think protein, the science is pretty clear that we should at least be having 1 gram per pound of body weight.
I don't know. I still have been getting people pushing back on this.
Really?
Yes.
And the argument is what?
So I look at this really from body composition. I mean, that's my focus is body composition. And for people who want to lose weight, gosh, the easiest thing is to have them eat protein first. They're not hungry, right? But there's still the 2 longevity camps. And there's that longevity camp of like, if you want to, increase health span, lifespan, keep mTOR low. I'm like, I want great flux and I need balance. You wouldn't want to keep insulin low all the time. We'd have a problem. You wouldn't want to keep cortisol low all the time. You'd have a problem. Nor do you want to keep mTOR low all the time. You want it to come up, come down. You want insulin up, down, right? And so I still hear that over there. In fact, I was just somewhere where they had that discussion saying they're going to come out and say, we need to eat lower protein. I'm like, I completely disagree. In fact, I think we should probably be supplementing with essential amino acids too, just to make sure people are getting what they need, especially women who tend to
not
eat less. Yeah. And they just tell me they can't get enough protein in. I'm like, well, eat it first.
Yeah.
I just watched you eat your biscotti, your muffin, your this, your that, like just eat it first.
Right. Yeah, the low protein camp, it's interesting. I think we're seeing science unveil in real time as people age. I mean, if I were to see you next to Walter Longo and look at body composition and just say, who's going to age more gracefully?
I was going to say, could I take him? Let's do an arm wrestle, dude.
I don't want to be too judgmental, but I mean, it is interesting. You look at how people are eating and how they're aging. Look at Sean Baker, 58 years old.
Oh my God, he's a specimen.
Right.
Yes.
So this idea that theoretically mTOR is this driver of all these different diseases, but the other foods that increase mTOR are cookies, biscotti, ice cream cones.
And wouldn't it differ with the tissue we're talking about? Like, I want my muscles, like you look at what happens as we age and you look at the risk with sarcopenia, and the person talking to me about this, I also was looking at going, you look sarcopenic to me,
Right.
Let's do some pull-ups. I look at this and think, I want to be as functional as possible for as long as possible. And you must have great muscle size, strength, and power to do that. And you can't build those without protein, right? And if you look at the amount of protein turnover we have each day, I want to make sure that I have optimal to handle that.
Totally. Because there's no real store for protein in the
No.
body.
So we're going to be breaking down muscle, which we want to break down, build up. But if we are not really paying attention to this, we're going to be breaking down more than we're building up.
Yeah.
And I know that's not like, I literally go do a DEXA now every 6 months. And because for my 60th, I'm like, that's it. I'm going to get in the best shape ever. And I was like, okay, got down to my leanest body fat that I was in my 20s with more muscle.
Amazing.
So I'm like going, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And when I was at SC for my PhD work, and we had master's level athletes in their 80s and 90s that, they could beat a 30-year-old any day of the week.
Yeah, they're crushing it.
Mm-hmm.
The lifelong athletics, as people get older, there was just a study, because the Olympics are going on as we record this, showing that Olympians live on average about 5 years longer than non-Olympians when you match their age. So the idea of regularly exercising and stimulating mTOR and doing these things is very beneficial.
Well, and you look at I think what's the big scary thing about mTOR is cancer, but then you look at people who exercise regularly and their cancer risk is as close to zero as it gets.
Right.
So, I don't know, put these things together. Quality of life, way lower risk of cancer because you're killing off those cells all the time. And, you can do the things you want to do.
And feel good,
yeah,
throughout life and move well. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm guilty and have been more guilty in the past of drilling down into these mechanisms, whether it's mTOR or IGF-1 or what have you. And you get really excited about the cellular biology, but then you kind of lose the forest through the trees. And I think sometimes we're seeing that in all facets of health. We see that with cardiovascular disease, monomaniacally focusing on LDL, but affecting, not looking at LP(a) or all these other factors. So that's interesting. But what I found with the protein conversation is it gets really sort of clouded or obfuscated with, well, what's better for animal welfare? What about the environment? How sustainable is it? So all these other sort of emotional buttons and levers get pulled, and then we're kind of getting away from what we're talking about.
Right.
So we need to talk about just one topic at a time. Like, what is best for human health and longevity, supporting muscle? We know it's so important for, as you mentioned, overall health, cancer reduction, preventing frailty, sarcopenia, and not confusing that topic with the other aspects of the environment or animal welfare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's an environmental issue, just stop food transport.
Yeah.
And we should probably stop traveling so much. But I mean, those, you know, you look at it and go, what's really causing the problem? You know, it's being in Europe and having fruit that doesn't taste like the fruit here. And I realized, well, it's because they're not transporting it. Like, if it's not in season, it's not there.
Yeah. Which is what we should be doing.
Right?
Here.
Yeah. That's what we should be doing. Just eat seasonal, local, organic, rotate your food, the stuff we know that we're supposed to do. But then it's like, you go, oh, I can get cherries and it's December. Yay.
You're in Minnesota, right? Show me the cherry tree in December.
Exactly. It's like, come on.
Have you seen that meme on the internet where there was pears grown in Latin America? They were packaged in the Philippines and then now they're sold in the US. So it is kind of interesting that we focus so much on how destructive meat and cattle
Right.
are for the environment. But then you look at these so-called plant-based foods, which I quite enjoy. I like pears. They grow in our backyard.
Now, I don't think of that as a plant-based food. To me, a plant-based food is the weird burger thing. Like where was I? And they literally had on the menu, this was just over the last couple days. And I remember looking at this going, you have a gluten-free, battered, plant-based fish stick. What would that be? What is that?
Jackfruit maybe? Or yeah, it's
like,
bizarre.
ew.
Taking all these, and think about the greenhouse gases that are created to do that from the monocrop production and whatever else. It's just an interesting conversation, but I feel like this is going to be like the topic of our life in the next 5 to 10 years, as the climate activists really sort of go after diet and protein in this. But getting back to, for your clients, where do you like them to aim? People always want numbers and targets.
Yes.
How many grams, whatever. Does it change on where people are at on their fitness journey?
You know what's so interesting about all of this is a lot of the numbers I was taught in my 20s are very different than the numbers now, but yet we haven't changed. So just like even body fat percentage, back when I was in school, I was taught that, you know, a healthy woman was 18 to 22% body fat, maybe up to 25%. And that if she was athletic, she'd be somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. And men were, you know, healthy at 8 to 15%, right? And now it's entirely different. And so, you know, I look at these things and go, numbers, I'm sorry, I'm going with the numbers for where you want to be optimally, and not try to make this whole idea that you can be healthy at any size is so unfair to people, because you're giving them misinformation. And by the time they realize that it's a bunch of BS, it's going to be late and hard. So I think the first thing we need to do, and I started doing this years ago because I couldn't find any norms for skeletal muscle. And literally back, I think this was 25 years ago, I created norms for skeletal muscle because I was like, really, if we focused on having the right amount of muscle mass, which, you know, we have to do the proxy of fat-free mass and a guesstimate. Okay, we don't have any great way to be super accurate, but we can get close enough. I think that if we start to look at this and go, let's focus on improving our skeletal muscle, and how you could just do this is say, get yourself in the right range for your body mass index with a healthy body fat. If you are at the right range for your BMI, but your body fat's high, your skeletal muscle's low, right? So that's an easy one. And then as far as the other numbers go, are you looking for like protein? What I look at a protein is, I think that the range should be 0.7 as the minimum per pound of target body weight. And honestly, if someone's really working on recomping, going up to 1.5.
Okay.
Because it's just going to be easier.
Yeah.
So that makes it easy for that 1 gram, but I just want people to not be scared if they go over that. There's still this idea of, oh my gosh, I went over. And I went, and nothing happened. Right. You know, like if your body really had to do it, it could turn it into sugar, you know, and use it. So, but that's really hard. I had someone I was interviewing, they told me that, you know, you don't want to eat too much protein because it'll be stored as fat. And I go, not very easily. That's a big, really hard process to ever get to be stored as fat.
Yeah.
So.
I like that. In terms of protein sources, I'm personally not a huge fan of chicken. We have backyard chickens and stuff like that. I love eggs and red meat. Some people don't like red meat. They don't like the taste or,
Which
whatever.
is really too bad because, gosh, the polyphenols, I mean, red meat, I think, is a huge, important part of our diet. Yeah. So
let's talk about that. What aspect, I mean, I know you're a fan of creatine, which is where I want to go next, and the carnonutrients. That's something you've been talking a lot about for years, creatine, carnitine, taurine, all that. But why do you think red meat is a superfood?
The polyphenols in it. So we don't think about that. And I remember, as I started to look at the carnivore diet, and I always joke, if I had to be on a diet, I'd be on the carnivore diet. Like if I had to do one thing, it would be carnivore and coffee. That would be it. But, when I look at that diet, I'm always like, yeah, but where's the fiber? Where's the fiber? But when you look at what you can get a lot of nutrients in meat that you don't think about. We tend to think of meat as protein and iron. But there's all these polyphenols in there too, especially depending on the animal's diet. We are what we ate. I think the big argument around meat is always, of course, the way we're treating cows or what they're eating. I'm like, yeah, but eat good ones. Eat clean. You are what you ate. So I think red meat is really a great cornerstone for people's diets because of all the nutrients they're going to get into it. And I agree with you. Like most of the chicken that we get is just bad.
They're grown in warehouses on concrete.
It's just nasty chicken. It's always amazing. I was in Peru a couple summers ago and we stopped by the roadside to a chicken stand. Literally, the chickens were there and then they were cooking the chickens. I'm glad I didn't see the in-betweener of that. Right. But those chickens look entirely different than our chickens. They don't have those big breasts, right? They haven't been like augmented chickens like we have that are higher in omega-6s. So I'm much more a fan of clean fish, lamb, and meat. I agree with you. Right. Those are the better choices. And if you're not intolerant, like great eggs. Now, just being in Europe, I remember walking up to the buffet and looking at the scrambled eggs and going, the scrambled eggs are bright orange. Even here, when you're ordering when you're going to the store and getting pastured eggs, they do not look like the eggs of Europe, which is really disappointing. It's great that you have chickens and you can get the bright orange yolks at home, but for most of us, at least make sure you're getting pastured.
Totally. No, I agree. And what's interesting in Europe is they don't rinse the eggs off. I mean, at the grocery store, they're out near the cereal or whatever it may be. They're not stored. So yeah, I found the food quality, having just been in Europe, we were both there around the same time in June, to be much higher across the board.
Oh, it's incredible. Like I came out of, and literally we ate everything. People are like, do you follow your, diet there? I go, I would never have done the virgin diet in Europe because there's no need, I eat everything there. I'm just not a big bread eater, although at one restaurant, they had this like 24-hour fermented sourdough. We're like, bring it over here. But it was crazy. We went to a 17-course Michelin dinner. We went to a wine tasting. We went to all of these things, ate all of this stuff. I come home. I have dropped 2 pounds. Wow. And the minute I was at an airport. I told you I was in the IT global outage. So we're now stuck at an airport hotel. We go to dinner. I have fish. I have vegetables. I have the worst stomach ache ever. Like I look like I've got, I'm 6 months pregnant, dying. It was my first meal back. Wow. Yeah. So I don't know how to fix this one. We have so messed up our food supply. And when you think about it, like, I make good choices and I get stuff, I'm getting great stuff from great places and still, so what does the, typical person who's going to an average grocery store, it is really hard. And that's not even looking at the food desert situation.
Right. It's very challenging. I don't know why that message is not being conveyed from the healthcare professionals about the importance of quality whole real foods. And yeah, I don't know the solution, but I think it is more of a grassroots movement and encouraging people to do what you just said several clips ago, and that is eat within 100-mile radius if you can.
It's cheaper too. It'll be a lot cheaper.
If you care about the environment, that seems to be the most viable solution. And then you're eating foods that are in season. There's good research to show our microbiome sort of changes seasonally. Mm-hmm. And then so in the winter months, you're having more meat, more stews, things like that. Maybe
all the root vegetables fun.
Yeah,
it just makes sense.
So I think that's the solution. But getting people to get onto that message is tough, because we focus on calories, and then we look at these different diets and they focus on these numbers and point systems and low calories.
Oh my God, the Weight Watchers situation. It's
Yeah.
like, will we ever recover from that? I don't know. You look at, so I looked at Spain. I went, what are our takeaways? Our takeaways are, except for the Americans, I didn't see anyone walking down the street eating or drinking. Like if they were going to have a coffee, they sat down at the coffee place and had a coffee. They didn't have a jumbo-sized Frappuccino with whipped cream on it unless they were an American, right? They didn't walk down the street eating. They actually took time with their meals. Now, granted, their meals are ridiculously late at night, but, you know, it's all real food. And I was looking at just the difference in ultra-processed food in Spain versus the United States. Their diet's maybe 25% ultra-processed food. Ours is over 70 now.
The late night eating thing is a conundrum for me. Having spent time in Latin America, do you think that they're able to sort of overcome that with all the socialization and walking and taking time for their meals? I mean, to me, that seems like all the research that I've read about eating close to bedtime is bad for body composition and sleep quality.
Blood sugar. I know it makes no, that's the one I was like, but I don't know how to wrap my brain around this. The only thing I looked at there is I went, well, we just spent 2 hours eating dinner, maybe 3. And then we all went and walked.
Makes sense.
So at least the walking is going to aid the digestion. And I'm assuming, because I was like, what time do you go to bed if you eat at 10 o'clock?
Sure.
And what time do you get up? And what are you doing? And so that one, that's the one I wouldn't take home.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't make any sense. However, they are walking after that. So that definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah. Speaking of walking, there's a lot of good research to show we should be walking at least about 9,000 steps per day. Is that something that you found to be pretty effective? Just, you know, I know you walk and are intentional about when you walk, particularly in the post-meal window. What do you tell your clients?
So I'm obsessed with walking. I'm very, very left brain algorithmical. So I like to kind of go, what do we need to do in terms of fitness priorities? And I think the place we all need to start is tracking your steps. Now I'll tell you, this drives my husband crazy because for some reason, you know, we'll be together the whole day and I'll have like 2,000 more steps than him. He's like, what is it? I go, I think you must put your hand in your pocket. I don't know. Like you're not swinging your arms like I'm swinging. But as I started to track it, I realized, gosh, there are some days I'm getting like 7,000 steps. This is not okay. So I've made my benchmark now, my like bare minimum is 10,000 steps, which of course you could imagine on that boat. I'm like, okay, we got to do something here. When I'm on a cruise ship, I never take the elevators. And even in hotels, that's kind of our rule. Like whenever we can, we take stairs as much as possible. And we walk as much as possible. But I think for a client, if you're listening, you're going, all right, I'm fired up. Let's get in shape. I think the first place we start is to make sure that we're getting that activity in, that we're getting in minimum 8,000. I really like 10, 12, you know, more is better. And then the next part of that is to add some intensity. And I think these rucking vests are the greatest things ever. Like I just love rucking vests. So that's such an easy way to add intensity because I live in Florida and there's no hills.
Flat.
Yeah. It's like, so what are you going to do? And it's great if you're just at home on a little treadmill, you know, walking pad, you can add your rucking vest. But then after that, then I start building in, now let's build in resistance training. Now let's add in some power and strength into it, you know, some high velocity. But I think that's your core foundation that we have to emphasize. It's like flossing your teeth, drinking water, getting your steps in.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what weight do you use personally for the rucking vest? What's yours?
Depends what I'm doing. So I'll go anywhere from 15 to 25.
Okay.
I know. And then I saw my buddy Shalene Johnson's at 25 and I'm like, you're like half my size. So I was like, I need to probably up that.
Jack it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Go back and forth maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it to be very effective, rucking. I have a 100-pound one that I use to train for like the summer hiking, backpacking season and things like that. And I'll do a mile with that several days a week. But it's amazing. Like just, if you look at your heart rate, I mean, it jacks it up like
difference.
20%.
Huge. Well, I don't know if you remember this because you are much younger than me, but back in the day we had these stupid little hand weights that everybody was using to work out with. And I'm like, don't do that. And they were putting ankle weights on and going and walking with it. I was like, don't do that. Just, you know, if you think about it, we started rucking when we were kids. We wore backpacks. Remember all the books we used to have to take to school? Mm-hmm. Like we were rucking. So I have a backpack with me on this trip because it's like, all right, I'll be able to pull this off. And I go, yeah, but I don't really have anything heavy I can put in it to go travel. I guess a ton of water bottles, which would work. But it's one of the easiest ways because if you don't have a rucking vest and you don't want to spend $100, just take a backpack and throw some books in it.
Yeah, makes sense. And it seems from a evolutionary standpoint or teleologic perspective, humans would do that, right? Hunter-gatherers would go forage for food, whether it's finding berries or nuts or hunting. It's something that humans
Well,
probably
think
did.
of your moms. I think of like when I was a, young mom and I had my kids a year apart. So I had like the year and a half and the 6 month, and I had a baby Bjorn on the front and I had a bigger backpack thing that my older one could sit on in the back, and I'd go hike the hills.
Amazing.
I was up in North Carolina. I was like, all right, this'll work.
Yeah.
It was like the ultimate rucking.
Totally.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I love that. And plus you're encouraging your kids and getting them in nature early on. There was just a really interesting study in Lancet Scientific Reports finding time in nature is correlated with physical health and reductions in all these different diseases. And we kind of discount that. So one thing I recommend for people is like, yeah, it's great to do a treadmill, if it's snowy, 5 a.m, but if you can exercise outdoors, you feel so much better.
I told you I was on that boat trip with the Blands and the Perlmutter. So David and Elise Perlmutter and Tim and I ran out. We would do hikes every day. And literally, I'm like, this is what they call forest bathing. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and we're walking through it. And David's telling us all the research as to why this is so important for our neurology, et cetera. But just the chlorophyll, the smells, the sunlight, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. So, and plus it's great for kids. I mean, a lot of kids now just spend up to 6 hours a day on screens, so encouraging our kids early on to put them,
throw them outside.
Yeah. That's amazing. I want to, talking about kids, I want to get into hormones, but also let's finish up on protein and carnonutrients. Something that you were telling me offline, and that how creatine really helped you with jet lag. We know creatine helps with cellular energy production during intense exercise, but there's other cognitive benefits. How did you discover this?
So when you look back, when someone says, what would you do differently if you had to do differently? I would be like, I probably would not have been in the sun as much, and I would have started creatine really early. I used to train people at Gold's Gym in Venice, and creatine was the dude thing. Yeah. So I just never even thought about using it till a couple years ago. And as I started to unpack the research on it, I'm like, this is like every woman should be on creatine, in my opinion, because if you look at it, we have less tissue stores, and we store the majority of creatine in our muscle, but it's a small percent goes to our brain, and it's amazing. And so that's why when you look at using it beyond just for muscle performance, and bone health, et cetera, if you want it for your brain, you got to push it a little bit more too. And women typically are not getting creatine rich foods as much as men are as well. So you have that issue, they can get some from fish. So I've never been a good time zone adjuster, and I talked myself into this. I was like, you can't do this. And then I started to read the research on creatine and sleep deprivation, and it's incredible. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a try. I was talking to a creatine researcher. He goes, this is an incredible thing to use for jet lag. So I have my baseline that I use, and then I just kick it up. Like I'll kick it up for exercise, and I'll kick it up for jet lag. And I mean, if I get someplace, like when we went to Madrid, we took an overnight flight that was only like 7 hours because it was from Boston, which is a terrible red eye flight, right? And so we get like 4.5 hours of sleep. We get to Madrid, and what I did was I booked a dinner that night as early as possible, 8 o'clock, which we were the first ones there, right? 2.5 miles from the hotel. And I booked it and paid for it so that we would lose the money if we didn't go. So we walked to dinner. So we knew when we landed that we had to go walk to this dinner. And we were both like, so we just hit ourselves with a bunch of creatine, and we were fine. It is amazing the difference you feel. And it's this really nice energy, not like a caffeine type of, it just feels like someone just turned the light bulb up. It's just fantastic. And, I went from, being in London with you, then we went to Boston, then we went to Madrid, then we went to Lisbon, then we went to Florida, then we went to Seattle.
Wow.
And literally there were 2 days. It was crazy shifting with zero jet lag.
That's impressive.
That's never happened before, by the way.
Right. That's really impressive. Yeah, the studies coming out on creatine as it pertains to sleep deprivation are really interesting, because if you look at like word recall, cognitive processing, verbal acuity, all these things, after they intentionally deprive sleep in subjects, it's really impressive compared to the control group. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that it has a brain-based benefit, because they think of creatine and they associate it with anabolism. And they think, well, I don't want to put on that much muscle, or I don't want to lose my hair. It's like, well, creatine is really helping with energy production.
There is zero on that hair loss thing. Like all these crazy myths that just won't go away. I think if we get ourselves to a nice baseline of creatine that we should always be on, and then push it, use it for hard workouts, for sleep deprivation, because you want to make sure you have what you need in your brain. But I mean, then there's the postmenopausal study that showed that women on antidepressants who use creatine had way better effects than women who weren't. So, I mean, but you need to have enough. There's a small percentage that's going to be in the brain, and it's not going to be in the brain if you don't have enough tissue stores of it in your muscle. So you need to make sure you're getting enough of it. And if you're a woman and you're eating the typical female diet of, like the yogurt with the fruit on top and the muffins and that stuff, you're not getting it.
Right. For a minimum effective dose, would you say like 5 grams a day if women are not eating red meat?
So if you're taking monohydrate, yes. And what I have women doing who are taking monohydrate because they're so freaked out about it is start with 1 gram, then go to 2. Then go to 3. Just bump it up and take it throughout the day so that you're not like worried about it. And then make sure that you're also doing bioimpedance, because you want to have more water in your muscles. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So we've gotten we're so weight focused, women are, and we've got to start to look at what that weight's made up of. Like I was a teenager, I was always the heavyweight person in school. Right? Because I was always muscular and I was always the tallest. So I just got used to being heavy. And I remember wanting to be a model and them telling me I had to lose 20 pounds. Now I was probably 10% body fat at the time. And I tried to lose 10. My dance teacher thought I was anorexic. And I remember the time just going, you know what? I'm just not a skinny person. I'm going to choose strong.
Yeah.
Because you can't be both.
It's amazing. Yeah, I agree with that mindset, and not focusing on just this sweet spot of 120 pounds or whatever it is. There's like this
120 pounds. So I had a client come to me and she was 120 pounds and she wanted to lose 10 pounds and she didn't need to lose 10 pounds. She was skinny fat, she needed to lose some fat. She needed to put on some muscle. Fortunately, I had one of the first Tanita $5,000 bioimpedance scales that was segmental that told me everything. And over the course of the year, she lost 10 pounds of fat and put on 10 pounds of muscle. And she dropped like 2 inches off her waist. She went from 25% to 18% body fat. She looked like an entirely different person. And you can guess what I'm about to tell you.
She gained weight?
No, she didn't gain any weight. She stayed exactly the same. And she was upset.
No way.
Of course.
Gosh, that's wild. These stigmas run deep, and these biases, and well, I think thankfully that perception is changing thanks to CrossFit and Instagram, and people are seeing female athletes look really feminine and good with more muscle. So I think that's going to take this old idea that women need to be very petite and
what's
small.
Interesting, I don't know where it even came from, because if you look at most men, they're not attracted to like skinny minis. So it's like, where's it coming from? Right. Forget them.
Yeah.
So, it's, I don't know where that ever came from and why it won't go away.
Yeah. It's challenging. But I love the aspect that you mentioned there, and our cells need water. And that's what you look at, the Tanita unit or any bioimpedance, and creatine helps tug water into muscle tissue in particular. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
But I think people are so afraid of the evil water retention and this, but there's actually some interesting research using creatine in hot, humid environments and helping athletic performance stay at a high level in where we know that temperature is inversely correlated with like VO2 max and these proxies of athleticism. So it's actually a good thing. The water retention should be, that's part of what makes you, part of its strength enhancing benefit. So I'm glad you're helping to dispel that myth that, well, if creatine helps you retain more water in your cells, you're going to be more hydrated, not the opposite.
Right. Which is ultimately going to be better for body comp, losing fat, having better cortisol levels. Like, your body does not like being dehydrated.
Right. Another kind of nutrient that you've been talking about for a long time is carnitine. What do you think about carnitine for fat loss and this? Is there any?
Yeah, it was one of the first things that I learned about early on because of our mutual friend, Robert Cran. And at the time, it was like, okay, this was going to be the miracle. I think the book was called The Carnitine Miracle. Wasn't that the book you read?
I think so.
I think it's very interesting to look at organic acid tests and see if this is something that could help you or not. Now, I've used it a lot for brain nutrition, doing acetyl-L-carnitine, but it just really depends on if someone needs it or not. Mm-hmm. And I didn't find it to be this miracle that someone took carnitine, all of a sudden they're dropping body fat. It's like, I wish it was the case. I do feel like it helps with energy and especially brain energy. But again, it's going to depend on someone's diet.
I agree. Speaking of Robert, he passed away pretty early. What you knew him? I went to several of his seminars back in Boulder and things like that. Did you know that he had symptoms of colon cancer?
So I still remember the phone call I got from him because he goes, "I've just got such bad adrenal fatigue," and I go, That doesn't sound like adrenal fatigue." And my guess is, having been around, my dad died of cancer and had a cough. He was a smoker and had a cough for years. We're like, "Did you check on the cough?" And another girlfriend who had really bad skin cancer with this huge mole. And we're like, "Did you check the mole?" And, we'll never know. But my guess is that was a way to put your head in the sand and kind of go, this must be this, right? Although it's so unusual, you still look and go, how does a healthy 40-year-old have colon cancer? Like, that is just such a bizarro thing. And you wouldn't think to check unless you had the symptoms of that. So he just, I don't know, it's still one of those head scratchers.
Some people speculate, but he was really enthusiastic about 5-methyltetrahydrofolate and folinic acid in this, that perhaps overdoing that.
He drove a pathway.
I don't know. I just wanted to talk to you about.
It's interesting. I am not as excited about supplements in general as I used to be. I don't know where you stand with this, but I used to be like, every time I go to another conference, I'm like, another thing, and I've really kind of hit the brakes on a lot of it, where I still think like the foundational things we should look at is do an omega-3 index, optimize your omega-3. Do a vitamin D3 test, optimize your vitamin D3 and K, and get your magnesium dialed. Those are like my foundational things. And then beyond that, I'll look at more things like electrolytes and creatine and essential amino acids and collagen. I do love my Mitopure from Timeline and Qualia Senolytics. Those are the other ones. But I am not anywhere where I used to be with like
taking so
obsessive amount of supplements.
Not even a multi. Do you take a multi ever?
I don't take a multi. I've done, and it's probably time to do another organic acids test. And generally the only thing I ever find that I need there is, hit myself with some more Bs. Yeah. But other than that, I'm usually always fine. And now that I've got Mitopure, I'm not even taking CoQ10 like I used to. So,
okay. Remind me, what's in the Mitopure?
Mitopure is urolithin A.
Okay.
It's that compound that we should be able to make in our guts if we were eating a lot of cranberries and walnuts, and we're the 40% of the people that can. But the cool thing with it, and when I look at that and the senolytics, as we age, we're breaking down more than we're building up. One of the things that tends to slow down is our ability to get rid of these damaged cells. So with Timeline's Mitopure, it's mitophagy. So it's helping you clear out, recycle, regenerate your mitochondria. So big thing for aging. And then with the senolytics, they have 9 different types of senolytics to clear out the zombie cells. So I look at those things and go, that's the stuff I want to make sure of. Like, I'm building, but I want to get rid of the trash too.
Totally. That's key. But
yeah.
That's why I love exercise.
Yeah, which everyone talks about, like, let's do intermittent fasting for autophagy. I go, just exercise. Exercise.
It's really, that's been a hard one for me, because I started out making a lot of videos on fasting, although I did exercise at the same time, but the research was quite appealing. But when I started to dive into autophagy as it's related to exercise, and part of the adaptations from exercise is autophagy, Like, wow, this is a way better mechanism to clear these so-called bad
and it's
cells.
predictable, because I'm still wondering how we know when autophagy really starts, and I've never seen a clear answer on this.
Well, you have to look at the cellular expression of autophagy-related proteins, but to that
And wouldn't it be different for everybody? Like,
well, there was one study that I love to share, and we'll just quickly highlight it. Sedentary controls versus people who were physically active, and they ascertained physical fitness by VO2 max. So they stratified people who were fit based upon their age-related VO2 max. People who had really low VO2 maxes because they did not exercise after 36 hours of fasting still didn't hit the same level of autophagy compared to just 18 hours of fasting for people who were fit. So it's like, look, if you want to get the most out of your fast, you need to be fit and train regularly.
well, and plus you'd want to be fit and training so you're not losing muscle during your fast.
Very
so yes, yikes.
Yeah. So that's, I think, a message that hopefully after
Another exercise for the win.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like, where's the bad stuff on it?
it's hard to come by.
It's hard to
takes
come by.
time.
Yeah. It's,
it takes effort, but that's the only.
You know what? In life, if you do hard things, then you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And you're going to get faced with hard things. And so the more you can train for those hard things, the easier they all get. Like I look at this and I go, the less you do, the less you can do. But the more you do, the more you can do. Yeah. So exercise is a very controlled way for you to do hard things, because I loved that book, Michael Easter's Comfort Crisis, and whatever that next one was that he did. But it's so true. It's like we just get more and more and more comfortable. You look at what's happening with our health, and a lot of it's because of us being so comfortable.
It's a great point. And speaking of that, what about sauna and cold plunges? Where do you fall with thermal stress?
Oh, so we have at the house, I'm not a fan of biohacking. Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of good recovery. Like, to me, I look at it and go, if you're eating correctly and exercising well and sleeping well, like, I don't think we should hack those things, get all that stuff dialed. And if there's something you want to work on, take a shortcut, but you can't shortcut the basics. What we did at home was we created I have an amazing gym at home. And then we took what was our gym and we turned it into a recovery room. Cool. So we have a big sunlight and sauna. That's our evening sauna. And then we have a small fast heat sauna that goes up to 180 degrees. So in the morning we can go in there, do that, and then go get in the cold plunge. And then we have the Juve big panel of red lights, and then I go stand in front of the red lights. Of course, I have to be home to do that. Tough. So that's the challenge. In my perfect world, I would be doing that, 3 to 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. The reality is, like, I've been home a week the whole summer. So,
yeah. But it's fine.
There
You're
you
out in
go.
nature. You're in
yes.
Europe. I mean,
yes,
you got to look
yes.
at all the quality of life.
It was well worth it.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a big fan of that. I'm really intrigued with this research showing saunas helping with anabolism and doing them after you've resistance trained. I have not done that one yet. What I'll do is I'll get up in the morning, do my sauna, the hot sauna, and then get into the cold before I go, so I don't block any muscle protein synthesis. And then at night we'll watch. That's our Netflix. You want to watch Netflix? You got to get in the sauna.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a really good trade-off.
Yeah, because otherwise you're flopped on the couch. I'm like, at night I either want us out walking or at the sauna. We got to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
That's key. And the photobiomodulation with like the Juve and these red lights and infrared lights and so forth. What have you noticed with that?
So I just started with the face one, since I can't travel with the big red one. We did get, when we were in London, we met a guy who has this wraparound red light company. So we brought that with us for Tim because he's getting a hip replacement. So we have an ice machine. We have the wraparound red and a bunch of supplements. I don't know. I just don't know what it's doing. And I don't know if it's just I haven't been consistent, but I can't tell.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell, like sauna, you're like, oh boy. And cold, red light is the one where I'm there for 12 minutes and I'm like, watching you on YouTube, sure. Entertaining myself going, I hope this is doing something, but I can't tell. Can you?
No, I mean, so I did a little experiment in 2017 when I got the Juve light. They sent one to me and I wanted to figure some things out. And I had been hearing from Ben Greenfield that it increases testosterone. So I ran my baseline testosterone levels and then put it, near my genitals for 10 minutes a day. And I did see a significant increase in free and total testosterone.
Really?
So that to me was pretty
How long did
interesting.
it take to get that?
So that was about 60 days. So I did it every day, 10 minutes. I would just stand in front of it naked, basically.
Yeah.
But that was pretty impressive.
That's really impressive. Like the guys, when they came over to the house, said it could, restore my thyroid function. I was like, wow, but I would have to be in front of it for 30, and that's what I haven't managed to pull off, is really being in front of it enough days in a row to be able to see a thing. So an interesting thing happened when we went to Korea last summer on the way to Bali. And we were with, do you know Ann Shippey, Dr. Ann Shippey?
Yeah.
So Ann's like, I want to go to the ginseng museum. I'm thinking, really? Anyway, you have to have an appointment to go. It's a whole thing. We get there. It's this state-run ginseng museum, and they have this special 6-year-old black root ginseng they do not export. Somehow we end up with a year's supply for all of us of ginseng, thousands of dollars. And a couple months into this, Tim gets his testosterone levels back, and I get my hormone levels back. Estrogen, testosterone, thyroid. They're all high. And I'm like, haven't changed anything. In fact, I'd had a hysterectomy, and I'm like, if anything, I had mine tested because I probably have to crank things up. No, had to cut them down. And I was then at a lecture that Chris Shade was doing, talking about improving hormone receptor sensitivity. Now, I knew this for insulin, but I don't know why I never thought about it for anything else. And he was talking about ginseng. And I went, oh my gosh, that's what happened. Wow. We just improved our hormone receptor sensitivity, and we were able to lower all of our hormones. That's amazing.
That's profound.
Yeah.
Was this in Seoul? There was the
Yes.
ginseng. Isn't that beautiful? Seoul was amazing.
I loved it. I loved the food, that whatever that steak was that's like, better than Wagyu, that we went for dinner one night, and Shippy's like, we need to come here every night. I'm like, I think that was a $200 steak, Ann.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's kimchi with every meal, before and after. Yeah.
The food, it just shows you how, when you go to these countries and they always have something pickled, there's always some fermented food there, and it's just nothing I grew up with. So the problem is I hate fermented food except for wine because I didn't grow up with it. And it's like, ooh.
Yeah, it's a little bitter.
Smelly.
So with regards to the ginseng, that's an amazing tip. Do you still supplement with ginseng?
Oh, yeah. In fact, we just started to run out of it. And Tim, it turns out once you're on the list, they'll ship it to you. So we just ordered another couple $1,000s of this black ginseng. But it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing. So, those are different things that I'm looking at now, is if you could use something that helps restore insulin or hormone receptor sensitivity. Wow.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, with all the research coming out on microplastics and how they're getting into our tissues and augmenting hormones and stuff like that seems like a really nice thing.
You just wonder how much of that we could get out with consistent infrared sauna use. I just feel like every house needs a sauna. This is such a big deal. And then you look at places, I don't know if you've been to Iceland, or one of my favorite places on the planet. And, they're one of the happiest countries. There's the top 4 of the happiest, healthiest countries. They all spa. And it's their regular stuff that they cold plunge and do saunas. And and they have those thermal baths. And it's just part of what they do every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's really great for socialization too, especially in the winter. It's like, what else are you going to do? Either drink, watch football, or go in the sauna and do cold plunges. I mean, it's a great way.
Gee, which would be better?
I wonder. That's wild. Getting back to hormones, that's one thing I wanted to address with you. I've personally noticed in my 40s DHEA to be pretty effective. With hormones, are you doing, there's transdermals, creams, there's pellets. What have you found to be effective?
First of all, I think that I'm so relieved that the information is out, even though people are still afraid, but at least the information's out on that silly Women's Health Initiative. And I mean, it really devastated a whole generation of women. However, we now have doctors. I don't know if you know Dr. Felice Gersh. She is amazing. 70-year-old woman who is basically putting women who were in that lost generation on hormones in their 60s and their 70s. Because it was always like, oh, you can't start if you miss the window. It's like, well, no, you can't. You aren't going to be able to undo some of the loss of bone and the cardiovascular, stuff that can't unfry an egg, but you can still get a lot of benefits. I was fortunate in that I was teaching this course called Overcoming Weight Loss Resistance. And one of the things in the course was, thyroid issues. And another thing was sex hormone imbalances. Well, I noticed the minute my thyroid went down, and I remember going because my TSH would always be around 1, and all of a sudden it jumps to 2.2, which would be normal range, except for me, all the side effects. And so I started supplementing with that in my 40s. But then when my son got hit, I went into like immediate like metabolic crisis with my hormones. And I started using creams to begin with. I do not like creams. I think that, and I'm not a fan of pellets, because if you don't have the right dose, you're stuck. Yeah. So, and when you really look at hormones, once a woman's through menopause, it's so much easier. As they're going through, the last thing you'd want to do is get stuck with a dose, because you're on you're basically on a paddleboard out in the middle of the ocean, and sometimes it's calm and sometimes it's absolutely crazy, and you've got to be able to adjust things as needed. And so I think oral progesterone, I love the patches for estradiol. And then I use shots of testosterone. I found that when I used the cream, it worked too much. I was like, this is what a guy feels like. And then it stopped working. But then I can titrate these easily and change them. Now they're really stable.
Nice.
But there was quite a while in there where I was shifting things. When I first started using hormones, I was able to do most of my estrogen through testosterone, because testosterone was the first one that started to drop. But this is where working with a good functional doctor, and also kind of knowing where your levels were. Like if you really look at this, we should be identifying levels in your 30s, early 30s, maybe 20s. So you really see where you feel best. And then you should be working with your thyroid and your adrenals to really optimize those, so that by the time you need hormones, you need the least amount. Right? That. And you're doing as much as you possibly can. Like if you're completely stressed out, you're going to have a problem. You got to fix that first. You can't just Band-Aid these things with hormones.
Right. And
but on the other hand, take your hormones.
I agree. Yeah, especially women after menopause.
You'll lose your brain, you'll lose your bones, you'll lose your heart. Like you look at the risks for women, and now this research coming out that's showing that you probably have a lower risk of breast cancer when you're taking hormones, but it's really taking them correctly.
Right. And not using the hormone-like synthetic products that mainstream medicine foists on people. That's the crazy thing to me. Women will say, well, I'm on progesterone, and it's like a synthetic progestin.
Yeah. It's like, why would you do that? It's a really inexpensive, easy, oral compounded thing. Like that's not hard.
And have you found that to help with sleep in particular?
So I am not a good person with progesterone. I feel like, and this is where everyone has to be different. Like I use it a week out of the month. Progesterone makes me break out, cry, and gain weight. When you look at steady state elevated progesterone, the only time that you've got steady state elevated progesterone is when you're pregnant. The minute I got pregnant with my kids, I gained 12 pounds. I wanted to cry. And I can count on one hand the amount of times that I cry. Like I just don't cry. If I'm pregnant or I have too much progesterone, I'll sit and cry and want to eat chocolate chip cookies. So you got to know yourself, right? I'm not someone that does well with progesterone, so I cycle it very carefully. But if you look at it, if you're high progesterone, low estrogen, that will be insulin resistance.
Okay. So address that first.
Well, work with a really good functional medicine doctor who understands the lifestyle side of this. Look at the gut. Your gut better be working well so you can detoxify these hormones too, right? So you want to make sure you've got your gut working well, you've got your stress managed, you're dealing with your adrenals, your thyroid's dialed in. If your thyroid's not dialed in, you're not going to be able to balance your hormones. Then you start dosing these things. And I really feel like it's the least amount you need. The least amount you need to get to where you want to be at baseline, which is your cardiovascular markers look great. I remember I was working in Palm Desert, and I would see the doctors would send me all of their clients, all of their patients with their labs. And I could tell before I even would look at what they were taking if they were on hormones or not. Because if they were postmenopausal, not on hormones, elevated LDL, elevated insulin, elevated inflammatory markers. Because you look at estrogen, it's going to help you build muscle. It's going to reduce inflammation, super important for insulin sensitivity. So that's where you've got to look at this and go, okay, how's my bone mineral density? Yeah. Something we should be testing girls in their teens, in their 20s. I'm not sure why we wait till the egg is scrambled and then go, oh shoot, you've got poor mineral density.
Through urine?
Oh no, so bone mineral density is a DEXA.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a DEXA. So because girls are going to build their bone in their teens, early 20s. Those are prime bone. Like when you really look at it, the most important thing that you could have with a teenage daughter is to get her into resistance training, get her into things that build her bone, build her muscle, build that mitochondria, right? And yet it's not happening. Yeah. Hopefully it's happening now, but.
Yeah, people are waking up to that. I mean, part of it is logistically gyms. I mean, my daughter's 12. I can't bring her to the gym. I used to sneak her into one gym, but their insurance waiver doesn't allow them to train until they're 14.
So I still remember back in the day that you were not supposed to lift weights if you were a little kid. And I go, okay, but we're doing all of this gymnastics. Yeah. Like we're doing push-ups and pull-ups and jumps. So what's the difference, right? So, wow, that's just too bad.
Yeah, maybe that will change over time. That's wild. But I want to get back to, you said something about your testosterone, how that dropped first. Is that a universal phenomenon, or do you think that's just unique to your?
I think that's, these things are, we're all snowflakes. For a lot of people, the first thing that drops is progesterone. That's why you'll see women have trouble sleeping. They get anxious. But if they just really crank that and estrogen's down, it'll go down more. Mm-hmm. So that's why you really got to just work with someone and get this dialed. And it has to be, you have to actively participate, because until you get to that point where it's smooth sailing, you're postmenopausal, which is the greatest thing ever. But until you get there, things are going to shift. You're going to be adapting. You're going to be moving things around. And that's really going to be more based on your symptoms. And you just have to become aware. Like I discovered, I couldn't recover from the gym. And I don't know if you've listened to anything of Dr. Vonda Wright. She's an amazing orthopedic surgeon who's talking about the musculoskeletal symptoms of menopause. And for me, I would go to the gym and go, I can't recover. Couldn't recover. Was always feeling a little inflamed. Same workout, couldn't pull it off. And was on estrogen. I just had to kick it up a little bit.
Mm. So that was both the estrogen and the testosterone was affecting the recovery, or you think it was more?
It was estrogen. Wow. We all think of testosterone as this muscle building anabolic supplement for women, or hormone for women. Estrogen. We need estrogen to build muscle.
That is sort of paradoxical to the common wisdom. I think most people would not think that estrogen is so protective in that way for women.
Yeah, it is. Wow. I mean, testosterone matters, but estrogen really matters.
Amazing. And what you found to be most effective is a patch for estrogen specifically.
Easy, so easy to use.
And is that a Triest or?
No, it's estradiol.
Wow.
Yeah, estradiol. I've been using something. Do you know who Karen Martell is? Mm-hmm. She makes a really great estradiol cream, but it's more for your skin. It's great for your skin. Okay. Like that's the other place that women will start to notice. So it's just topical. It's not going to be enough to make a difference. I don't think Triest is used in estrogen. Back in the day, a lot of people were doing bias, but I think estradiol is really, because estradiol is so weak. Mm. I mean, it's a great thing to use on your skin, but it's not going to really affect anything. It's really estradiol is the big mover.
Wow.
Yeah.
JJ, you're a wealth of knowledge. Part of this, how you've accumulated so much knowledge is you've been in this space for a long time, but your network.
Yeah, I'm just still here.
It's amazing. We've covered a lot of ground, from muscle, protein, resistance training, hormones. You've interviewed a lot of people and have had many people speak at your Mindshare Summit, which is amazing as well. What's like the biggest thing that you've learned? And I know that's a broad statement, but maybe, or something that you had to unlearn throughout this journey where you're like, gosh, I just wish more people would.
I wish from the beginning I'd been more critically open-minded and not thought in absolutes. That's where I'd say I started. I was like, this is the way. I remember when I was on Dr. Phil, there was this video where I said, never, never, never do cardio before weights. And now we know it's like,
some people like that.
I'm like, just like do a fasted workout. It's like, there are no absolutes. Like there are very few absolutes in life. And for so much of this, the most important, we tend to miss the big picture because we're so concerned about, did we eat within our fasting window? Did this break the fast? Is that a dirty fast? Should I eat before I work out? Do I need to have that protein shake right after? Like all this ridiculous stuff. It's like, don't major in the minors. If you focus on the big things, like really looking at what you eat and getting really clear on that and making sure you're getting the protein, making sure you're getting the fiber and the phytonutrients, and then being well hydrated and adding in those supplements that we tend to be deficient in that will make a difference, and then moving more. And then doing that resistance training and adding in some balance and adding in some velocity, and making sure you're recovering well and restoring, and then hanging out with cool people. Yeah. It's like those are the things. And I love looking at all the stuff that Brian Johnson's doing, because here he is spending $2 million a year to biohack his body. And all of a sudden you go, and what are the most important things? Eating and sleeping and friends. Like, yeah.
The basics.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not sexy, but boy, they work.
Right. Have you met him?
No.
Yeah, I don't know him either. Yeah, it's interesting. I did that, the pheno age test through True Health Diagnostics. I haven't gotten the results back yet, but have you been looking at this epigenetic age?
So I think that Dr. Rika did that test on me. And I'm trying to remember, because there was one issue in it that I was like, I just listened to Austin Perlmutter just did an amazing longevity talk for Big Bold Health that I just listened to, where he was talking about all the different ways, because they've been doing testing now to see what Himalayan tartary buckwheat can do. Turns out it acts a lot like it's a GLP-1 agonist because of the bitters. And which is pretty interesting. But I've got to go back and look at I haven't been focusing as much on that, because I look at this and go, right now, I like to pick one thing at a time and work on it. Yeah. And I think that book Gary Keller wrote, The One Thing, is probably like the book I should read every day. Just focus on the one thing. For a year, it was all meditation and everything I could do to help with my adrenals. Right now, I'm really focused on VO2 max.
Nice.
That's why I was talking about, I got to be careful, because I'll do weight training all day long, but I really need to get in there and do power and sprinting. So I got a sprint treadmill at home.
Nice.
Yes, because when I saw that meme, I'm like, that will not be me.
Yeah.
I will be sprinting. But I think, if you look at all these things, work with someone, prioritize out of those big pillars of fuel and recover and move. Where's the first focus? Focus there. Yeah. Nail it. Build on it. Go to the next thing,
That's smart. I do see, that's the beauty of the internet, is we can, disseminate all this information. The downside is there's so many, new rabbits to chase, and it's hard for people to stay focused on one thing.
Well, and the other downside is, and I was just having this conversation with Jeff Bland, because I was like, it's so frustrating, because I know if I took a stand and said outrageous things, that I'd be way more popular, right? And I can't do it. I just can't do it. So, that's the other challenge with the internet, is quite often the people that have the loudest voices are saying the most ridiculous things, the most polarizing things. And, the very clear things that make a difference aren't so sexy.
It is. Yeah, it's more the controversial things that get the algorithm's attention in the comments on both sides. That's wild. But as you said, I think that majoring in the majors and not focusing on the minutia, the foundations, really move the pendulum.
Yeah. And what's great is most of that stuff doesn't cost a lot of money. Yeah. It does take time. And I had a great Robert Cran early on. He said, if you don't have time, make time. Yeah. And you really have to. You can't hack exercise. You're not going to be able to do it in 5 minutes a week. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I have comments on that, but we'll talk about that later.
Nor can you hack sleep.
Yes.
So,
there is all this polyphasic sleep stuff, and people like getting up for 2 hours and then going back to bed. Yeah, that seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I remember hearing, but that's what we used to do. We'd get up at midnight. I'm like, really? Huh. Yeah. I know how I sleep best. Yeah. So, and it's not getting up at midnight for 2 hours to eat and do whatever, and then go back to sleep. So.
Yeah. JJ, really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing great wisdom. If folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
jjvirgin.com. And I've got Well Beyond 40 that you were a guest on. So yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
That was super cool that I ran into you at that event. Totally. Although we run into each other now at a lot of events.
Yeah,
so
it's awesome. appreciate your work, and thanks again for offering clinical rounds and these different conversations a long time ago, because you really helped shape my mindset in nutrition and my career development. So thank you for that.
Well, and thank you for then taking that out there and doing amazing things. Like your YouTube channel is fabulous. I absolutely love it. So big fan, big subscriber. Everybody should subscribe to that.
Thank you so much.